The fastest way to misunderstand a person is to mistake their uniform for their identity. On a cool Friday evening, the grand dining room of Sterling House shimmered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, while soft piano music floated through the air like a quiet promise. Every polished wine glass reflected golden light. Every white linen table stood perfectly arranged, and every guest dressed in tailored suits and elegant evening gowns seemed determined to celebrate another successful week. It was the kind of restaurant where powerful people gathered to make decisions worth millions of dollars, and where the smallest mistake could become the center of whispered conversations before dessert was ever served. Moving calmly through the crowded room was Daniel Carter, a 39-year-old single father whose neatly pressed white waiter shirt, black apron, and patient smile made him almost invisible to those who measured worth by titles instead of character. He greeted every guest with the same sincere respect. He remembered returning customers by name. He quietly helped younger co-workers whenever they struggled, never asking for recognition and never expecting applause. Years had taught Daniel that dignity did not become stronger because someone noticed it. It simply remained steady whether anyone was watching or not. Just after 7 o'clock, the restaurant entrance opened and conversations gradually softened. Olivia Bennett stepped inside with the effortless confidence of someone accustomed to leading every room she entered. As the billionaire chief executive officer of Bennett Innovations, she had built one of the country's most admired technology companies before turning 35. Business magazines praised her discipline. Investors admired her instincts. Employees respected her intelligence, although many found her impossible to approach. Wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal business suit and carrying herself with flawless composure, Olivia crossed the marble floor while the restaurant manager personally welcomed her back. Daniel approached with professional courtesy and a relaxed smile. "Good evening, Ms. Bennett. Your table is ready." Without looking away from a message displayed on her phone, Olivia answered, "Sparkling water. Room temperature. Please make certain nothing is forgotten." "Of course," Daniel replied warmly. A few moments later, he returned carrying an unopened bottle and a crystal glass. As he carefully poured the water, another server brushed lightly against his shoulder while passing behind him. The surface of the water rippled gently inside the glass without spilling a single drop. Olivia immediately looked up. Her expression hardened. "Is this what passes for professional service now?" she asked loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. Conversation slowed throughout the dining room. Daniel remained composed. "I apologize if your experience has not been perfect. I will gladly bring you another glass." Olivia leaned back in her chair with a faint smile that carried little kindness. Maybe the restaurant should simply find another waiter. Several uncomfortable glances spread across nearby tables. No one seemed willing to interrupt. Daniel neither defended himself nor lowered his eyes. "If another server would improve your evening, I will happily arrange it," he answered gently. Olivia folded her arms. "People stay in jobs like yours because they never expect more from themselves." Silence settled over the room. Even the pianist allowed the final note of the melody to fade naturally into the stillness. Daniel met her gaze without anger, embarrassment, or resentment. His voice remained calm, steady, and impossible to provoke. "You are welcome to mock me again if you believe it will make your evening brighter," he said quietly. "But another person's position has never determined the value of their character." No one spoke. The words seemed to linger beneath the chandeliers long after they were spoken. For the first time in many years, Olivia found herself looking at someone who neither feared her authority nor sought her approval. He simply refused to surrender his dignity. Daniel offered a respectful nod before continuing his work exactly as he had moments earlier, unaware that one quiet sentence had planted a question inside Olivia's mind that neither wealth nor success would allow her to ignore. The elegant rhythm of Sterling House gradually returned after Olivia Bennett finished her dinner, yet the atmosphere no longer felt quite the same. Guests resumed quiet conversations. Servers carried polished silver trays between candlelit tables, and the pianist welcomed another gentle melody into the room. But more than one customer found themselves watching Daniel Carter with new eyes. He greeted every departing guest with genuine warmth, thanked each family for visiting, and quietly helped a younger co-worker organize the dessert station before beginning his own closing responsibilities. Nothing in his expression suggested resentment. Nothing in his voice hinted at wounded pride. By the time the final reservation had left the restaurant, Daniel carefully folded his black apron, thanked the kitchen staff for another successful evening, and stepped outside beneath the cool night sky where the city shimmered with thousands of lights. His aging blue pickup truck waited faithfully in the parking lot, and after the engine hesitated for a moment before starting, Daniel smiled and gently tapped the steering wheel. "You and I have both had longer days," he said quietly. 25 minutes later, the busy downtown skyline faded behind peaceful neighborhoods lined with maple trees, modest brick apartment buildings, and softly glowing porch lights. Daniel climbed a familiar staircase, carrying a small grocery bag filled with milk, bread, fresh fruit, and pancake mix. Before he could unlock the apartment door, it swung open with joyful excitement. "Dad!" 9-year-old Emma Carter threw her arms around him with such enthusiasm that he nearly dropped the groceries. Her bright blue eyes sparkled beneath loose strands of blonde hair as she laughed. Daniel hugged her tightly and smiled. "Now that is the best part of my entire day." Emma placed her hands on her hips with playful seriousness. "You are 10 minutes late." Daniel widened his eyes. "Did you really count?" She nodded proudly. "Every minute." He laughed softly. "Then tomorrow morning you have earned extra chocolate chips in your pancakes." Emma grinned. "That sounds fair." Inside, the apartment was simple, clean, and filled with quiet warmth. Children's books rested neatly beside framed family photographs. A colorful drawing covered the refrigerator door. On a small wooden shelf stood a smiling photograph of Daniel's late wife, her gentle eyes remarkably similar to Emma's. Vegetable soup simmered quietly on the stove, while fresh bread cooled beside a folded kitchen towel. Daniel glanced toward the photograph before helping Emma set the table. "How was school today?" he asked. Emma beamed with pride. "I earned the highest score on my science quiz." "I knew you could." She smiled before looking toward her mother's picture. "I told Mom when I got home." Daniel's expression softened. I believe she heard every word. Emma reached into her backpack and unfolded a sheet of construction paper covered with colorful crayons. Across the top, she had written, "My hero." The drawing showed Daniel wearing his waiter uniform while holding her hand beneath a bright yellow sun. "Our teacher said to draw someone brave," she explained quietly. Daniel looked at the picture for several long seconds before kneeling beside her. "Thank you, sweetheart. I will treasure this forever." Later that evening, after homework had been finished and bedtime stories had filled the apartment with laughter, Daniel quietly counted the money remaining inside a small envelope marked rent. There was never much left after groceries, utilities, and school expenses, yet he simply placed the envelope back inside the kitchen drawer without complaint. Before turning out the lights, he gently tucked Emma beneath her blanket and whispered goodnight. Across the city, Olivia stood alone inside her luxurious penthouse overlooking the same glowing skyline. Expensive artwork surrounded her. Awards lined polished shelves. Success filled every corner of the room, yet unexpected silence settled over her thoughts. No matter how hard she tried to focus on tomorrow's meetings, she continued remembering the calm waiter who had refused to let another person's opinion define his worth. And for reasons she could not explain, that quiet dignity lingered in her heart far longer than any business victory ever had. Monday. Evening arrived with a cool spring breeze, and Sterling House once again welcomed a dining room filled with polished elegance, warm candlelight, and quiet conversations drifting beneath magnificent crystal chandeliers. Daniel Carter arrived 30 minutes before his shift, just as he always did. He greeted every co-worker by name, adjusted a table that leaned slightly to one side before any guest could notice, and patiently showed a newly hired server how to fold linen napkins without making the young man feel embarrassed about asking for help. Daniel believed that true professionalism was never about appearing important. It was about making everyone around you feel capable. Across the city, Olivia Bennett concluded another demanding day inside the headquarters of Bennett Innovations. She had approved a major expansion project, completed interviews with financial reporters, and signed documents worth millions of dollars. Yet none of those accomplishments occupied her thoughts for very long. Instead, she found herself remembering the calm waiter who had answered public humiliation with quiet dignity. Frustrated by her own curiosity, she returned to Sterling House later that evening, convincing herself that she simply wanted another excellent meal. Shortly after 7 o'clock, her familiar black sedan stopped outside the restaurant entrance. Olivia stepped inside, wearing another impeccably tailored charcoal business suit. Her blonde hair perfectly styled, her confident posture immediately recognized by the staff. Daniel welcomed her exactly as he welcomed every returning guest. "Good evening, Ms. Bennett. It is wonderful to see you again." Olivia looked directly at him before answering. "Good evening." Her voice carried none of the sharpness from their first meeting. Throughout dinner, she quietly observed him while pretending to review messages on her phone. He remembered returning guests by name without hesitation. He noticed an elderly woman struggling to read the menu and discreetly offered a larger print version before she could ask. He quietly replaced a dropped fork for a little girl and made her laugh with a simple smile before her parents even realized what had happened. Every action appeared effortless, yet every detail reflected careful attention to people rather than procedure. As coffee was being served, the restaurant entrance opened once more. An elderly gentleman with neatly combed silver hair and a polished wooden cane stepped inside. Despite his age, his posture carried unmistakable confidence earned through decades of leadership. Daniel immediately walked toward him with genuine warmth. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson. It is wonderful to see you again." The older man smiled broadly. "Daniel, my friend, I was hoping you would be working tonight." Daniel laughed softly. "I would not want you to think I had abandoned my post." The gentleman gently placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "You have never abandoned anything important." Their exchange lasted only a few moments before Daniel escorted him to his favorite table near the windows. Olivia recognized the visitor immediately. Charles Anderson had spent decades leading one of America's most respected manufacturing companies before retiring. Business schools regularly invited him to lecture on leadership, and chief executive officers across the country still sought his advice. Yet he had greeted a restaurant waiter with the familiarity and respect normally reserved for trusted colleagues. Curiosity finally overcame hesitation. As Mr. Anderson prepared to leave after dinner, Olivia approached him near the entrance. "Excuse me, Mr. Anderson. May I ask you something?" The older gentleman smiled kindly. "Of course." Olivia glanced toward Daniel, who was helping another family gather their coats before they stepped into the cool evening air. "How do you know him?" Mr. Anderson looked at Daniel for a long, thoughtful moment before turning back toward Olivia. "You're asking the wrong question," he replied gently. "The better question is why a man capable of leading people with extraordinary wisdom chooses to serve them with extraordinary humility." Before Olivia could ask another question, the distinguished businessman smiled politely, stepped into the waiting car outside, and disappeared into the city night, leaving behind a mystery that quietly refused to let her walk away. The question Charles Anderson had left behind refused to leave Olivia Bennett's mind. The following morning, she stood inside her executive office overlooking the city's skyline, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows, polished wood, and screens filled with market reports, yet none of it held her attention for very long. Quarterly forecasts waited for her signature. Board members expected strategic decisions before noon. Her executive assistant carefully reviewed the day's agenda, but Olivia quietly closed the folder in front of her and interrupted. "Please find everything you legally can about Daniel Carter." The assistant looked surprised. "The waiter from Sterling House." Olivia nodded. "Yes, something about his story does not fit what everyone sees." By late afternoon, a small personnel file rested neatly on her desk. Olivia expected an ordinary employment history. Instead, she found almost nothing. Daniel had worked at Sterling House for several years with an excellent record and outstanding recommendations. Before that, Only a handful of short consulting assignments appeared, each ending without explanation. There were no interviews, no professional awards, no public social media presence, and almost no trace of a life Charles Anderson seemed to recognize. Olivia slowly closed the folder. "Nobody simply disappears," she whispered. Her assistant answered honestly. "We searched every public source available. There is very little to find." Curiosity only grew stronger. That evening, Daniel arrived at Sterling House, carrying a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. He quietly placed it inside the employee break room with a handwritten note that read, "Fresh blueberry muffins. Please enjoy." A young hostess opened the package and smiled. "Did you make these?" Daniel laughed softly. "Emma insisted everyone deserved breakfast for dinner. Your daughter sounds wonderful." Daniel's eyes brightened immediately. "She reminds me every day what matters most." Before the dinner rush truly began, a newly hired server accidentally assigned 2 different reservations to the same table. Panic quickly spread across her face as guests approached the reception desk. Daniel stepped beside her with the same calm expression he carried through every challenge. "Take one slow breath," he said gently. "Seat the anniversary couple by the windows. They mentioned celebrating a special evening when they made the reservation. Move the business guests near the fireplace where the conversation will be quieter." The young server blinked with relief. "How did you remember that?" Daniel smiled while straightening a menu. "People rarely remember every detail you say. They almost always remember how you made them feel." Within minutes, every guest had been seated happily, and no one realized there had ever been a problem. Daniel quietly returned to polishing wine glasses as though nothing unusual had happened. Later that evening, Charles Anderson returned for dinner with 2 longtime friends. As Daniel greeted them warmly, Charles smiled with unmistakable admiration. "Gentlemen, if every executive understood people the way Daniel does, many companies would become stronger overnight." Daniel shook his head with quiet humility. "You continue giving me far too much credit." One of the visitors laughed. "That humility is exactly why he is right." Olivia witnessed the exchange from across the dining room. After dinner, she approached Charles once more. "May I ask another question?" He smiled knowingly. "You still cannot stop thinking about Daniel." Olivia nodded honestly. "Everyone I respect seems to respect him even more." "What?" Charles looked across the room, where Daniel was helping an elderly couple into their coats before they stepped into the cool evening air. "Because genuine character always recognizes genuine character," he answered softly. Long before Daniel carried a serving tray, he carried responsibilities that would have overwhelmed many leaders I have known. Olivia's curiosity deepened. Who was he before all of this? Charles smiled kindly, but slowly shook his head. "That story belongs to Daniel, not to me. But I will tell you one thing. If you believe life reduced him to this uniform, then you have misunderstood both the man and the meaning of success." Charles quietly walked toward the exit, leaving Olivia standing. Beneath the warm restaurant lights, with the growing realization that every answer she uncovered only revealed an even greater truth waiting to be discovered. Thursday evening brought unusual anticipation to Sterling House. Every private dining room had been reserved. Polished crystal glasses sparkled beneath towering chandeliers, and the executive chef personally inspected every course before it left the kitchen. Quiet conversations among the staff revealed the reason for the heightened attention. Bennett Innovations would be hosting one of the most important business dinners in the company's history. Olivia Bennett and her executive leadership team were meeting with Horizon Capital, a respected investment firm considering a multi-billion-dollar strategic partnership. Months of preparation had led to this single evening. One successful discussion could influence thousands of employees and shape the company's future for years to come. Daniel Carter sensed the tension the moment he arrived for work. Managers reviewed seating arrangements again and again. Senior servers rehearsed every detail of the service. Even experienced employees spoke with unusual caution. Daniel simply adjusted a centerpiece that leaned slightly to one side, helped a coworker organize additional dinnerware, and quietly reminded everyone, people remember calm much longer than they remember perfection. His reassuring smile eased more than one nervous face. Shortly before 6:30, Olivia entered the restaurant accompanied by her executive team. She acknowledged Daniel with a respectful nod before leading her guests into the private dining room. It was the first time she had greeted him without the distance that had once separated them. Throughout the opening courses, the conversation remained productive as executives discussed innovation, logistics, market expansion, and long-term investment strategies. Then the atmosphere shifted. One of Horizon Capital's senior partners carefully reviewed the latest financial presentation before looking up with quiet concern. These projections do not appear to match the assumptions we approved during our previous meeting, he observed. The room immediately became silent. Olivia opened the presentation on her tablet and realized he was correct. Two different versions of the financial reports had accidentally been combined. Revenue projections reflected the newest strategic plan, while operating expenses had been taken from an earlier reporting period. Each document was individually accurate, but together they created unnecessary confusion. Questions quickly moved around the table. The chief financial officer attempted to explain the discrepancy, yet every explanation seemed to produce another question. Confidence slowly began slipping away from the discussion. Outside the room, Daniel prepared fresh coffee for the meeting. As he approached the doorway, he noticed the unusual silence inside. Through the partially open door, he briefly saw two summary reports placed side by side on the conference table. One small detail immediately caught his attention. The reporting periods printed across the top of each document were different. Daniel quietly waited without interrupting. Olivia noticed him standing respectfully nearby and remembered every conversation she had shared with Charles Anderson. After a brief moment of thought, she looked toward him. "Daniel, would you join us for just a moment?" Every executive turned toward the waiter with visible curiosity. Daniel entered calmly, placed the coffee service on a side table, and looked only at the cover pages of the reports. He never reached for the papers. "May I ask one question?" he said politely. Olivia nodded. Daniel looked toward the chief financial officer. Were these summaries prepared for the same reporting period? The executive checked the documents once more before pausing in surprise. "No," he admitted quietly. "One reflects quarterly assumptions. The other reflects annual projections." Daniel offered a gentle smile. "Then perhaps the numbers are not disagreeing with each other. Perhaps they are simply answering different questions." The room became completely still. Within minutes, the matching reports had been organized correctly, the apparent contradiction disappeared, and the discussion moved forward with renewed confidence. One senior partner smiled appreciatively. Sometimes the simplest question uncovers the clearest answer. Daniel quietly returned to serving coffee without waiting for praise, while Olivia watched him walk away with growing respect, realizing that true wisdom often speaks the softest, and wondering what other extraordinary chapters remained hidden inside the life of the humble father who never felt the need to prove his worth. The business dinner concluded with renewed confidence instead of disappointment. Horizon Capital agreed to move forward with the next stage of negotiations, praising the professionalism displayed throughout the evening. Executives exchanged handshakes beneath the warm glow of crystal chandeliers, while Daniel Carter quietly gathered empty coffee cups and dessert plates, moving through the room with the same calm focus he had shown since the beginning of the night. He neither accepted compliments nor lingered near the discussion. Solving the problem had never been about receiving recognition. It had simply been the right thing to do. As the final guests prepared to leave, one senior partner paused beside him. "Thank you," the investor said sincerely. "You reminded every one of us that complicated problems sometimes disappear when someone asks the simplest question." Daniel smiled politely. "Sometimes clarity has been present all along. We simply become too busy to notice it." The gentleman nodded with genuine respect before leaving the restaurant. Olivia Bennett watched the exchange quietly. For years, she had believed extraordinary people announced themselves through confidence, influence, and impressive accomplishments. Yet the man standing only a few feet away possessed none of the outward symbols she had always associated with success. and still he carried a quiet authority that every accomplished leader in the room seemed to recognize immediately. The following morning, instead of driving directly to Bennett Innovations, Olivia made an unexpected stop outside a peaceful lakeside home surrounded by tall pine trees and flowering dogwoods. Charles Anderson welcomed her with a warm smile before she reached the front porch. "I had a feeling you might visit," he said gently. They settled onto wooden chairs overlooking the calm water while morning sunlight shimmered across the surface of the lake. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. "Who was Daniel before he became a waiter?" Charles looked toward the distant shoreline with thoughtful eyes. "Years ago," he began quietly, "Daniel graduated at the top of his business school class. Before turning 30, he helped build a respected consulting company that specialized in solving supply chain challenges for manufacturers across the country. Clients trusted him because he listened carefully before offering advice. Employees admired him because he never treated anyone as though they were less important than he was." Olivia listened without interrupting. Charles continued. "The company grew quickly. Investors offered remarkable opportunities. Daniel could have remained in executive offices for the rest of his career." Olivia lowered her coffee cup. "Then why did he leave?" Charles smiled sadly. "His wife became seriously ill. Daniel sold his ownership in the company, stepped away from his career, and devoted every day to caring for her while raising their young daughter. After she passed away, several corporations invited him back into leadership. He thanked every one of them and declined." Olivia remained silent as the morning breeze stirred the trees around them. "I once asked him whether he regretted walking away from everything he had built," Charles said softly. "His answer has stayed with me ever since." He paused before repeating Daniel's words exactly. "Money can be earned again. My daughter's childhood cannot." The sentence settled into the peaceful silence between them with remarkable simplicity. Olivia looked across the quiet lake and realized that every award displayed inside her office suddenly seemed much smaller than one father's decision to place love ahead of ambition. For the first time in many years, the billionaire understood that success could never be measured only by what a person gained. Sometimes its greatest measure was found in what someone willingly gave up for the people they loved most, and that realization changed far more inside her heart than any business victory ever had. Several days passed before Olivia Bennett returned to Sterling House. During that time, she attended board meetings, approved international expansion plans, and spoke before investors who admired every decision she made. Yet something inside her had quietly begun to change. The words Charles Anderson had shared beside the lake refused to disappear from her thoughts. She found herself thinking less about quarterly reports and more about a father who had willingly exchanged executive success for bedtime stories, hospital visits, and precious years with his daughter. One Friday evening, she entered the restaurant alone. There were no executives accompanying her, no assistants carrying briefing folders, and no carefully planned business agenda waiting to be discussed. She requested a quiet table beside the large windows overlooking the city skyline. Daniel Carter noticed her arrival immediately and approached with the same genuine smile he offered every guest. "Good evening, Ms. Bennett. Welcome back." Olivia looked up and answered with unexpected warmth. "Good evening, Daniel." Hearing his name spoken so naturally by someone who had once refused to see beyond his uniform caused only the slightest pause before Daniel handed her the menu. "The chef has prepared a wonderful herb-roasted salmon this evening," he said politely. "I believe you would enjoy it." Olivia smiled softly. "Then I will trust your recommendation." Throughout the evening, she watched him with new understanding. He quietly noticed an elderly gentleman searching for his reading glasses and gently brought a larger print menu before the man could become uncomfortable. He congratulated a young couple celebrating their anniversary and surprised them with a complimentary dessert prepared by the chef. He patiently listened to a little boy describe his favorite baseball team before promising to tell the kitchen that an important future athlete was dining with them. None of those moments attracted attention, yet every small act carried the same quiet kindness. When dinner ended, Daniel returned with a warm slice of homemade apple pie. Compliments of a chef, he said. He wanted to thank you for joining us again. Olivia looked at the dessert before meeting Daniel's eyes. Would you sit with me for a minute if you have time? Daniel glanced across the dining room to make certain every table had been cared for. Satisfied that his co-workers had everything under control, he pulled out the chair across from her. Silence settled comfortably between them before Olivia finally spoke. I owe you an apology. Daniel listened without interruption. The first night we met, I judged you because of your job. I assumed your uniform explained your entire life. I spoke with pride instead of respect, and I was wrong. Daniel's expression remained peaceful. Every person has moments they wish they had handled differently. Olivia slowly shook her head. No, I chose to judge you before I knew you. Daniel offered a gentle smile filled with grace rather than victory. The important thing is that you chose something different afterward. Olivia lowered her eyes briefly before asking the question that had remained inside her heart. Do you ever regret the life you gave up? Daniel answered without hesitation. I miss my wife every single day. I have never regretted one afternoon I spent caring for her or one evening I spent raising Emma. He looked toward the city lights beyond the windows. Careers can be rebuilt. Childhood cannot. When my daughter is grown, I want her memories to be filled with my presence instead of my excuses. Olivia felt those words settle deeply within her heart. Every award displayed inside her office suddenly seemed far less important than the quiet promise one father had kept. As Daniel politely returned to his work, Olivia remained seated for several minutes, realizing that success had never truly changed its meaning. She had simply spent years looking for it in the wrong places, unaware that the greatest lesson of all had been quietly waiting behind a simple waiter uniform. The weeks that followed settled into a peaceful rhythm neither Daniel Carter nor Olivia Bennett could have imagined when they first met. Bennett Innovations officially completed its partnership with Horizon Capital, and business magazines praised Olivia's leadership with glowing headlines. Yet the greatest transformation never appeared in any newspaper. Employees quietly noticed their chief executive officer greeting receptionists by name each morning. She began eating lunch in the employee cafeteria instead of the private executive dining room. She visited new team members during orientation, asked about their families, and reminded every manager that respect should never depend upon a person's title. Many executives wondered what had inspired such remarkable change, but Olivia simply smiled and continued leading with a different heart. One bright Saturday afternoon, warm spring sunshine covered a peaceful city park where children laughed across wide green lawns. Colorful kites danced against an endless blue sky, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the air. Daniel sat beneath a large oak tree, reading aloud from Emma's favorite adventure novel while she eagerly waited for the next exciting chapter. A few moments later, she jumped to her feet and raced across the grass carrying a bright red kite. Her joyful laughter echoed across the park as Daniel followed with relaxed steps and a smile that revealed how deeply he treasured simple moments like these. You have to run faster, Dad, Emma called with playful determination. Daniel laughed. I believe the kite is already winning. A familiar voice interrupted the peaceful afternoon. I hope I'm not disturbing your championship. Daniel turned and smiled with genuine surprise. Olivia stood nearby dressed in blue jeans, comfortable sneakers, and a soft cream sweater instead of the elegant business suits she usually wore. Without the polished image of corporate authority surrounding her, she appeared relaxed, approachable, and almost transformed. It is good to see you, Daniel said warmly. You are never disturbing us. Emma hurried toward them, her cheeks glowing from the afternoon sunshine. Dad, is this your friend from the restaurant? Daniel nodded. Yes, this is Ms. Bennett. Olivia knelt so they stood at the same height. Hello, Emma. Your father talks about you with great pride. Emma smiled brightly. He says nice things about everybody. Olivia laughed softly. I believe that is true. Emma reached into the picnic basket resting beside the blanket and carefully removed a homemade chocolate chip cookie wrapped inside a napkin. Dad always packs an extra cookie because somebody might need one, she explained with complete sincerity before offering it with both hands. This one is for you. Olivia accepted the cookie gently, unexpectedly touched by such effortless generosity. Thank you very much. That is one of the kindest gifts I have received in a very long time. They spent the afternoon walking beside the quiet lake, watching ducks glide across the water, listening to birds sing from nearby trees, and helping Emma send her colorful kite even higher into the spring sky. There are no conversations about stock prices, corporate strategy, or billion-dollar investments. Instead, they shared favorite childhood memories, family traditions, simple recipes, and stories that brought easy laughter. Olivia gradually realized she had not looked at her phone once during the entire afternoon. As the sun slowly drifted toward the horizon, Emma reached up and slipped her small hand into Olivia's without saying a word. That simple gesture lasted only a few seconds, yet it quietly reached a place inside Olivia's heart that years of remarkable professional success had never touched. Watching Daniel smile proudly at his daughter, Olivia finally understood that the richest life was not measured by everything a person possessed, but by every meaningful moment shared with those who mattered most, and she left the park knowing that one final lesson still waited just beyond the horizon. Nearly 1 year later, Sterling House looked just as beautiful as it had on the evening when two strangers first challenged each other's understanding of success. Yet everything that truly mattered had quietly changed. Crystal chandeliers filled the dining room with warm, golden light. Fresh flowers decorated every table, and gentle piano music floated through the elegant room, where hundreds of employees from Bennett Innovations gathered for their annual appreciation. Dinner. Olivia Bennett had personally chosen the restaurant for the celebration, not because it was the most luxurious place in the city, but because it was where she had first learned that genuine leadership could never be measured by wealth, titles, or power alone. Executives shared tables with receptionists. Department directors laughed beside maintenance employees. Every guest was welcomed with the same respect, and every conversation reflected the culture Olivia had worked patiently to build throughout the past year. Daniel Carter moved quietly through the dining room exactly as he always had, carrying polished serving trays, greeting returning guests by name, and making certain every table received the same thoughtful attention. Nothing about his calm expression suggested that he expected to become the center of anyone's attention. Kindness had never been something he performed for recognition. It was simply the way he chose to live. As dessert was served, Olivia stepped onto the small platform prepared for the evening's closing remarks. Gradually, the conversations faded until the room became completely silent. She looked across the smiling faces before her eyes finally rested on Daniel, standing near the back of the dining room. Taking a slow breath, she smiled warmly. Tonight is meant to celebrate every person who has helped our company grow stronger, she began. But before this evening ends, there is one individual I need to thank publicly. Curious whispers disappeared as everyone followed her gaze toward the quiet waiter. Olivia continued with unmistakable sincerity. 1 year ago, I walked into this restaurant believing that a person's position determined their value. I judged someone without knowing his story. I believed success gave me permission to look down on another human being. I was completely wrong. The room remained perfectly still. Olivia stepped down from the platform and slowly crossed the dining room until she stood in front of Daniel. Looking directly into his calm blue eyes, she extended her hand. Thank you for answering pride with patience, disrespect with grace, and judgment with dignity. You taught me more about leadership than any boardroom ever could. Daniel accepted her handshake with the same peaceful smile that had never left him, even on the night when she had spoken harshly to him. Before either of them could say another word, one employee began applauding. Another quickly joined. Within moments, the entire restaurant rose to its feet. The applause echoed beneath the crystal chandeliers, not for financial achievement or corporate success, but for quiet character that had transformed hearts without demanding recognition. When the applause finally softened, Daniel spoke in the same gentle voice everyone had come to admire. Thank you for your kindness, he said. But I hope tonight is not really about me. I hope it reminds all of us that every person we meet carries a story we cannot see. Listen before judging. Respect before assuming. Choose kindness before you know the whole story. Silence returned, deeper than before, as his words settled into every heart in the room. A few days later, beneath the familiar oak tree in the neighborhood park, Daniel and Emma stood together watching a bright red kite rise effortlessly into a clear blue sky while Olivia smiled nearby, no longer searching for success in places where it could never truly be found. She had discovered that the greatest victories were measured by compassion instead of competition, by presence instead of prestige, and by the quiet courage to treat every person with dignity. In the end, the billionaire never changed the waiter's life. The waiter quietly changed hers, proving that true greatness never needs to announce itself because its deepest impact is always written in the lives it gently lifts.